I have learned a hard lesson about how easily an average man's daily life can turn into a real mess. When the events in this story began a few years ago, my family consisted of my wife, age 38, and me, Larry Dragonhelm, 42, with our children, Angelica, 8, and Elliot, 6. Though we weren't the happiest family in our Scandinavian county capital, we had managed to keep it together, probably because we believed that was best for our children. Everything began when I met my old classmate from school, Tom Homer, on a Friday after work at the alcohol store. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and as the store was rather crowded that day, we had plenty of time for talking. To our surprise, we found out that Tom's wife, Cecilia, was working at the same office where my wife had been for the last 6 months. He asked me, "I didn't see you at our wives' Christmas party, but are you coming to their company's farewell party for the old owner?" I told him I would like to come, but that I wasn't invited. Tom looked surprised and said, "Of course, you're invited. All spouses are invited. Why shouldn't you be? I'll ask to make sure. See you there, old mate." The reason for the big company party, only 2.5 months after the Christmas party, was that the old owners had sold their shares to a nationwide investment company and wanted to thank all their coworkers before the new owners took over on the 1st of March. Of course, I remembered the Christmas party. It was her first Christmas party at that new job, and she had told me that she was sorry. But I wasn't invited. She had bought a new sexy dress for the party. She's been a very gorgeous woman when she went there. And she came back home at 4 o'clock in the morning, in a very tipsy and messy condition. After some arguing, I had told her that I believed what she had told me about the party and the nightcap afterward at one of her friends' places. She cried and promised me that nothing at all had happened between her and any man. Of course, I had my serious doubts about her story, but what could I do without any evidence? Back home from my shopping, I immediately told her that I had met my old friend Tom Homer at the alcohol store, and that he told me that his wife works at the same company as her. She looked concerned as she replied, "What's her name?" "Cecilia Homer." "Do you know her?" "No, I don't." "Did he say that she knows me?" "No, he didn't, but he told me that all spouses had been invited to your Christmas party." "Who in the hell pretended to be your spouse at that damn party? And where did you spend that night?" She was pale when she replied, "I have told you several times that I thought spouses were not invited. I was new there and didn't understand the invitation." "So, you were the only idiot at the company who couldn't understand a simple invitation, are you? I promised to trace that jerk who screwed you after the party, and you can be sure that I'll make him regret his birth when I find him." She began to cry and sobbed. "I've told you many times that we were at least 12 to 15 people at somebody's house. Only a few drinks and a little dancing. No reason for you to be mad and jealous." There had been too many weak points in her story, but I couldn't go any further without evidence. So I asked her, "Am I invited and booked to the next company party?" Once again, I noted a strange expression on her face, because she had not mentioned anything about that party to me, but now she knew that I knew that all spouses were invited. She replied, "Of course, I have booked both of us for the party, but forgot to tell you about that." I had serious doubts about her telling me the truth. Needless to say, our marriage was down to a very chilly level. All thoughts about sex within it could only be regarded as wasted time. Then the mess got worse again. The next Friday after lunch, when I had taken a few hours off my job for some errands, she usually left her job at 1 o'clock on Fridays, so both of us were at home when the phone rang. I took the call and could hear that the caller was sitting in a car with dance music from the radio in the background, but he or she hung up without saying anything. She asked me, "Who was it?" I told her, "Your lover," but he hung up when he heard that I took the call. My reply was intended as an innocent joke, but I could not avoid seeing how she froze for a second before she began shouting, "You are totally weird. What the hell are you thinking about me?" It was an innocent joke, but now, after your overreaction, I don't know what to think. Was I right? She calmed down and replied with a soft voice, "No, you were not right, and it was rather one of your jealous humiliations than a stupid joke. But I'm sorry for losing my temper. I had a terrible day at the job today. That's not any excuse, but I hope it can explain my bad temper." At the party evening, she had chosen to wear a much less sexy dress than last time, and was far from a jolly mood when we went there. The party was held at one of the best hotels in town, where the dinner was served at several round tables instead of the usual long tables. We were 5 couples at our table, and I got the impression that she knew all the other women. I couldn't help it, but got the feeling that she regarded my presence as a pain in her backside that canceled her plans for the expected good time that evening. After the meal, when we had gotten coffee and a glass of cognac, her boss came to our table for a little small talk. When he saw me next to her, he said, "You must be Angelica's husband. We missed you at the Christmas party. Sorry you couldn't come." I replied, "I wasn't invited to that party. At least that's what Angelica told me." He looked at her and asked, "All spouses were invited. How could you miss that?" I told him, "She came home very late in a terrible mess, so I'm sure she preferred some standing from the office instead of me." Some of the other couples couldn't resist laughing, and Angelica was red as a tomato in her face. Her boss obviously found the situation slightly unpleasant and said, "I don't know anything about that," before he left our table. I replied, "You ought to know. There are 304 employees in all offices." Angelica began to cry, and I'm sure that the other couples found the situation painful because all of them excused themselves and left for the restrooms. Even I went to the restroom, where I talked for a few minutes with one of the other spouses who had been sitting at the same table as Angelica and me. He told me that his wife, and he had sat rather near to Angelica at the Christmas party. She had spent the whole evening very close to one of her fellow workers. He remembered my wife, because his wife had mentioned her noble and old-fashioned sounding surname. I had never expected anything like this to happen to me, but I know that many naive men before me got to know the painful truth about a cheating wife by some kind of accident. It hit me like a hard punch in my belly. Of course, I had noted that the sparkles between me and my lovely wife had been more rare recently, but such things as ups and downs happen in all marriages sooner or later, so I hadn't worried much about that. I was sure that things would brighten up again soon. I didn't see Angelica then. One of her coworkers told me that she had left the party and didn't reply to her cell phone. When the babysitter didn't reply to our home phone, I understood that Angelica was at home and had paid the babysitter off. I spent some time at the bar, and to my great relief, nobody mentioned Angelica. Back home, I found her sleeping in our bed. The next day was the worst day during our 11 years as a married couple. Angelica shouted and screamed but refused to tell me where and with whom she had been on a Christmas party night. On Monday morning, she went to her job as usual, and to her great relief, nobody at her job cared to say anything about how I humiliated her during the dinner, not even her boss, who obviously regarded it as her private problem. What the fellow workers said behind her back was quite a different matter. The next surprise came at bedtime, that Friday evening when Angelica initiated some great sex. She turned out to be very lively in several positions, which gave both of us great satisfaction. It was an enormous difference from her usual lying like a log. Of course, I suspected her new interest in sex with me to have some kind of connection with my new rude behavior and comments about a lover. Angelica fell asleep immediately after our intense sex, but I had too many thoughts in my head to fall asleep. The main question was, did she prefer me as a caveman rather than the good guy I was before? Nothing special happened during the next 8 days, and I got a sense that our marriage was slowly turning back to a better level again. Then everything collapsed like a house of cards one morning when I saw that Angelica had dressed slightly better than usual and had her hair fixed. During our breakfast, she told me that she had forgotten to tell me yesterday that she probably had to work some overtime that day because her boss had mentioned something about it yesterday. I didn't see any reason to keep quiet about what I thought. So I said, "Since when do you need to dress extra sexy for working overtime? Isn't it better to tell me the truth that you intend to go screw your damn lover again?" That took her by surprise, which was clearly visible in her face, before she began shouting, "Have you gone completely mad again? You ought to get help for that paranoid behavior. It's better we end this marriage so you can screw your damn lover as much as you want without doing it behind my back. I'm probably mad, but not so mad that I will remain married to a cheating wife, that's for sure." Angelica began to cry, and even our children began crying loudly. I began thinking, what have I done to my family? I had started the most serious quarrel in our marriage without having the slightest evidence of Angelica cheating. The only thing I had was the strange feeling I had felt during my sleepless night. After crying for some time, Angelica sobbed to me, "Do you really want a divorce?" "Yes, I can't see any other solution. If you intend to make a mess of this marriage, it will be best for both of us to split up as soon as possible so we can go on with our lives. I'm fed up with being treated like a pile of garbage. Believe me, I've had enough." Angelica rushed back to our bedroom, and I felt some remorse for accusing her of cheating, though I didn't have the slightest piece of evidence. I understood that I had acted like a caveman and done everything totally wrong. Of course, I ought to have done it the average way, by collecting evidence. If I had been able to get that, then I could accuse her. When I went back to the kitchen a few minutes later, she was dressed as usual for an average day. She didn't say anything to me, and I didn't know what to say to her. I began to understand that only a miracle could save our marriage. If Angelica was innocent, she could hardly take all the humiliation I had caused her during the last time. If she were guilty of having an affair, our marriage would be history, as soon as I found out any evidence about that. Back home in the evening, she told me a story that she had told her boss that I had refused her to work overtime, and he had accepted that because he knew me from the party. I ought to have called her boss, but didn't do that. To my great pleasure, I got unexpected help from the new owners who had taken over the company where Angelica worked. Their experts had made a secret investigation of the use of computers at the office and found out that the average time used for all kinds of private matters was as high as 52 minutes per day for each employee at the office. The worst one had been online for 16 hours during the week that was investigated. The next Monday morning, the whole staff at her office had been called to a meeting where they had been told the new rules, which meant that all private use of the internet was forbidden. The saved time and new organization even resulted in the 4 most recently hired people being let go. Angelica kept her job, but from now on, she had to use the PC she and I shared at home for all her email. The children had computers, but no access to the net. I've always been interested in computer programs and got a feeling that from now on, we would be playing in my backyard. I was ready for that and had prepared the computer with a mirror program that saved a copy of everything she did. Another program would get back everything she deleted. Within a couple of days, she had activated a new free email account on our computer for happycore_lass, besides her old Hotmail address, which she used for innocent chat with some of her old friends who had left town. The new account got only a few messages. A few real emails were from some happycore_lad, plus the usual junk mail. The only messages Angelica sent the first week were completely innocent to happycore_lad, telling him about her new email account and that she was available online again. Even his first reply, which she had deleted, didn't say much. Great to have my darling online again. One thing was sure for me now. Angelica was involved in something, and I had good hopes of being able to collect useful information about what. Of course, they could use cell phones for their main connection, especially now when she was limited to using only the computer we had at home, and she knew that I was rather keen on computers, but I was sure that she would prefer email for all longer messages. I decided that Angelica would never get any 50% of our assets if she caused our divorce as a result of her cheating. I had worked hard to gain a fair standard for my family, and no lover boy would ever get anything of that. Therefore, I began slowly working on the plan I had decided to use for saving my money. As the sole owner of our house, I could take a big loan for investments without any need for Angelica to sign the papers. To my great surprise, the bank agreed to give me all I wanted. The next day, I told Angelica that I had to go to Italy for some final negotiations about purchasing a new machine for my job. She had no objections or questions because I had done such trips before. The following day, I went to a local travel agency and bought a cheap airline ticket to Malaga in Spain, and even had them book a hotel room in the small British territory of Gibraltar, a rock that controls the traffic between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. Gibraltar is the most famous money laundry in Europe. I even had the travel agency book tickets from Gibraltar to London, and from London back home. As expected, Angelica didn't contact my job to find out that I had taken 3 days off. I left for the trip, took a local bus from Malaga to the Spanish border town La Linea, and then to Gibraltar. But I didn't wash any money. The only thing I did there was a sightseeing trip on, and in the famous rock. The next morning, I took the first flight to London and then back home. During the trip, I paid as much as possible with my private MasterCard, which would make it easy to see my traces if somebody wanted to do that in the future. The only thing I could do for the time being was to check what Angelica did on our computer. Not much of use so far. There was only one message from Happy Lad, who told her that he was sitting alone in a hotel room and wished that she had been there to comfort him. She didn't reply to him via email, so I checked her cell phone when she took a shower, but all messages were deleted as usual. Then at last, I hit bingo. His next email provided useful information. It read, "Hi love, sorry I was busy meeting important customers here in the north. A long way from you during those days your stupid husband was in Italy. I missed your hot lips and sweet box terribly every evening when I knew you were waiting for me. But I have good news for us. Wednesday next week, I'll have the whole day off in town, and the only thing booked so far is the dentist between 9 o'clock a.m. and about 10 o'clock a.m. The rest of the day is ours. Just you and me for the whole day, dear. Please take that day off, at least from 11 o'clock a.m., and be with me. Frederick." Now I knew his name and profession, which gave me a slight hope that she would use the email for her reply. She did and wrote, "Dear Frederick, of course, I'll take the day off after 11 o'clock a.m. May I suggest a romantic lunch at your place so people don't have to see us together in town when I'm off from my job? I'm sure that Larry still suspects something, so our timeout has been the right thing for us to do if we want to keep our love a secret. However, I can really agree that this one-time breaking of our timeout will be good. I can promise you that I've been thinking very often about you, and I am looking forward to our great day. Love, Angelica." To my great pleasure, I managed to find an apartment to rent and paid 1 year in advance, just in case I would get into some kind of trouble with the authorities during my divorce. A salesman named Frederick living in our town wasn't a clue enough to find him. It was too common a name and profession, though I suspected he worked for the same company as Angelica. However, I knew the date and time, and if I didn't get any further clues, I had a slight chance to tail her to his place. Nowadays, many people prefer to use cell phones for an increasing part of their communication with others. Obviously, Angelica and her lover boy Frederick did so because I wasn't able to find out any further information on our computer. The day before Angelica's expected great day, I had everything ready for my actions. My own and our shared bank accounts were emptied, and the money had disappeared on secret ways from the open market. A van with dark-tinted glass was hired. To my surprise, Angelica acted just as usual in the morning on her great Wednesday. No sexy dressing, nothing special with her hair, no visible signs at all about her expecting to have a great day with the lover boy. I began to hope that she had canceled the whole thing. However, I couldn't hide my stress, and Angelica then had a worried look on her face when she asked me, "Are you all right? You don't look so well." What could I say? I replied, "I'm fine. Just been thinking about some slight problems I have to fix today. But everything is under control." I was worried. "You look so pale." "No need for that. I'm fine. By the way, it would be great to have lunch together today, so we can talk about some important matters." Once again, she looked uncomfortable as she replied, "I would like it very much. But I'm sorry I can't do that because I'm already booked for an important lunch meeting at the job today. Tomorrow will be fine." I looked her straight in her eyes and said, "I understand that you must attend to the important matters first." Now even Angelica lost the color in her face. Hopefully, she gave a second thought to what nasty thing she planned to do during the day. Of course, I wasn't far from that. The future of our family depended on what she intended to do during the next few hours. I feared that it was our last family breakfast together, and our lunch would be canceled forever. Angelica left for her job and took Elliot with her to his press school. Angelica left for her school, and I stayed at home for a while. Once again, I had taken a day off from my job. At 10:30, I had the van strategically parked outside Angelica's job, so I could see both her parked car and the personnel entrance. Thanks to the tinted dark glass, nobody could see me sitting in a seat behind the driver's seat. 5 minutes after 11 o'clock, she was out to the parking lot, went to her car, and drove straight to a housing area just outside the town center and parked outside one entrance where she went in. I followed after her and could read on the information board inside that a Frederick Albinson had an apartment on the second floor. I gave her 5 minutes before I rang her cell phone. She had seen on the caller ID that it was I calling and replied, "Angelica here. What's your problem, Larry? You, my love, are my worst problem." She sounded surprised when she replied, "Me? Have you gone insane?" "No, my darling, but I have found your lover boy. He's at home now, and you were supposed to be there with him. I'm on my way to beat the tar out of him. Get dressed and move your bum out from his apartment before I get there." She sounded worried but said, "What are you dreaming about?" "Of course, I'm at my job. If you told me the truth, it's very good for you. Otherwise, it will be very bad." I ended the call, and now I was standing outside Frederick's door with a sledgehammer and a black garbage bag. Just as I had expected, about 1 minute later, a man in his mid-30s opened the door. I was ready with my right fist and hit him hard in his face. That took him by surprise, and he fell back into his apartment. A pale and shocked Angelica was standing behind him. I told her, "Get out of here now," at once. Before she reacted in any way, I had pushed her out of the apartment and locked the door behind her. Now, alone with Frederick, I attacked him with hard hits with both my fists until he fell down on the floor. Under different circumstances, I'm sure that this younger man in good shape would have won over me, but now he was taken by surprise, which, together with my wrath for my lost marriage, gave me such advantages that hitting and kicking the tar out of him was an easy match. When he was lying still on the floor, I took my sledgehammer and destroyed everything of value in the small, simply furnished one-room apartment. It was clear to me that this apartment wasn't his real home. So I took Frederick's cell phone and some papers with his home address and personal information from his briefcase. Angelica was still standing outside the door, ringing the doorbell and screaming, "Don't kill them! Don't kill them!" I opened the door, dragged Angelica back into the apartment, and told her, "He is yours now. Be with him as much as you want. I don't care about you two any longer." She got a shock again when she saw what I had done to Frederick and his apartment. She began to sob. "Please let me explain. Please listen to me, Larry." I told her to shut up and went out to the van, where I could read in Frederick's papers that he was working as a salesman for the same company as Angelica, but living with his family near the national capital. That explained his small apartment in our town. Frederick had destroyed my marriage. As the Bible says, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. I had only one thing to do. First, I rang his parents and asked them to take care of our kids after their school, because I had to work overtime, and Angelica had gotten some personal problems. They promised to do that. Then I switched off my cell phone and went away for a 2-day leisure trip with the rented van. I regret to say that I can't tell you anything about it in this story because I know that this forum has a large number of readers in Scandinavia, probably even those who are investigating my doings. Innocent people would get into trouble if I said something. Back in my hometown 2 days later, I switched on the phone again and could read and listen to many messages from it. My only reply to Angelica was a text message. I have filed for divorce, and that is my final decision about our marriage. After that, I spent the rest of the day moving my clothes and other personal things from my house to my new apartment. I left copies of the divorce papers on the kitchen table. Angelica's affair with Frederick had obviously lasted several months. If it had only been a one-time drunken fling after the Christmas party, there might have been a slight chance to forgive them. Or, if what I told her during our last family breakfast had gotten her to cancel their date with him, it would have saved Frederick from my severe beating. The next day, I went to my job as usual, and was a bit surprised because Angelica didn't call me. My only call regarding Frederick came from the police. They wanted to talk with me, and as both Angelica and I had a lot to do, we booked a time 3 weeks forward. After lunch, I rang Angelica's mother, who told me that the children were at her place for a few days, and that Angelica had told her she had no objections about the divorce. 3 days later, Angelica rang and was totally mad about the fact that our net worth was down to 0. She screamed about getting me sued for that, and for destroying Frederick's home. I told her that lost money could be replaced, but our lost love and crushed family was a much worse matter because it would never be replaced again. Angelica was not satisfied with that reply. 3 weeks later, my lawyer and I went to the police, and it ended up being a polite small talk. The lawyer had no objections to anything said there. The police accused me of beating Frederick so badly that he hadn't been able to work in 2 weeks, and of destroying both his apartment and his house. I denied everything except using self-defense when my wife's angry and desperate lover attacked me when I had interrupted their date. I got the impression that the policeman did his job, but he did not put in any extra effort to nail me. Obviously, he had no sympathy for a cheating wife and her lover. I didn't care very much because if I were found guilty and sentenced to pay Frederick, it would not give him any money. The sentence would only be a document for his legal right to demand me to pay him. But if I didn't have any money, it would be his problem, not anything the legal system would care about. To my great surprise, Angelica rang me and suggested a meeting about our children at a restaurant. I went there, and we were able to keep the meeting with civil behavior. Angelica surprised me with a confession about her affair with Frederick, which had begun only a few weeks after she started her new job. During a reorganization of the sales department, Angelica had assisted Frederick as a secretary, and there had almost immediately grown a tension between them. A lunch in his small apartment had ended up in his bed. They had continued with quickies now and then, but the chances for that were rather few because Frederick made only a few stops at the main office. When Frederick's wife could not attend the Christmas party, he had seen it as a great opportunity to have almost the entire night together. Angelica said that she had serious doubts but agreed to it after a while, which she said was the most stupid mistake in her whole life. She told me that although she had an affair with Frederick, the family and I had always been her first choice. She had never reduced her love for me, not even when I had begun accusing her of cheating. Angelica said that they had planned to end the affair the day that I had beaten the tar out of Frederick. She had already planned how to reward me when she was a faithful wife again. She told me that as his wife had dumped Frederick, they planned to live together, but she would immediately dump him if I promised to give her a new chance. I said, sorry, but it hurt too much. Then we agreed that she would have the main custody, but the children would be free to see me as often as they wanted. After some hesitation, she asked me about the money, and I noted tears in her eyes when I told her that I had lost everything in stupid speculations, and that was her price for getting rid of me. I told her that I had paid a much higher price for our separation than she had because losing my family was a much higher price than some darn money. Once again, Angelica promised to get the family together again as soon as I accepted her apologies and took her back. She didn't look happy when I told her that I preferred a cheating wife as an ex-wife. Before we parted, I warned her that hiring her lawyer to search for the lost money would cost her a huge amount and wouldn't give her anything back. The next Monday morning at the job, when my lovely secretary Sarah came in, I immediately noted that something was seriously wrong with her. She was wearing sunglasses, and when she took them off, I could see a real black eye at her left eye. The right eye was sad, as if she had cried a lot during the weekend. At first, she refused to tell me anything, but after a few minutes she said, "I'm a single mom now." "What happened?" I asked. "Daniel and I have split up," she replied. I was taken by surprise because I had always regarded Sarah and Daniel as the perfect couple. I asked, "How come?" "Because to be hit once by the husband is a terrible experience that can be forgiven as a mistake, but when it happens again, for the second time, it is a bad habit too bad to be accepted or forgiven. A man who can hit his wife twice will continue to do that for less reason if she doesn't dump him. Daniel hit me for the second time, and I will divorce him. I've always regarded him as a good guy and thought you two were the perfect couple. Why has he turned into such a lunatic?" "Because he is jealous. The first time he hit me was when I danced a hot tango with a nice South American guy at a wedding. He was a darn good dancer, but it was only an innocent tango that turned Daniel so mad that he hit me. No other men had any objections or cared when that handsome guy danced with their spouses. I forgave Daniel after a while, but told him that next time is the last time, and he promised that he would never do it again. But he did, and we will be divorced." "Why did he hit you this time?" "Because it is my fault that Angelica and you have split up." I didn't understand anything at all and asked her, "How can it be your fault that Angelica screwed that darn Frederick?" "That's far more than I can understand. She did it because you and I had an affair." I was so surprised that I shouted, "You and I had what? An affair? You and me having an affair? Why don't you tell me when and what we used to do? How can I be involved in this affair and not know anything?" "No, you are not the only one. Neither of us knew anything about that screwing, though you and I ought to have been the first two." I could hardly believe that a good guy like Daniel had turned into such a madman and caused his lovely, beautiful wife to divorce him. Of course, I had admired Sarah as long as I had known her, but I had never harassed her with any sexy comments or suggestions, though I knew that I had preferred Sarah over Angelica if given the choice. What could I say? I asked her, "Why didn't he ask me?" I have never cheated on Angelica, though I got many temptations during the years. Of course, I can't deny that I sometimes envied David for being married to the dream girl, but innocent dreaming and nasty action are two different matters. Where did he get such stupid and wrong rumors from? And why did he believe that crap without trying to find out the truth? Some of David's friends had heard rumors and told him. Rumors? Why didn't he ask you and me? How can he be so incredibly silly? That sounds insane. He asked with his fist. Incredibly, she tried to laugh and asked, "Now, when your dream girl is single, your place or mine?" "Mine will be fine. Deal." After an hour, she quietly asked me, "Are you still serious about our date?" I gave her my best smile and replied, "I don't intend to run away because what you offered me today only happens once in a lifetime." "Are you sure that I offered you anything?" "No, and I don't demand anything. But a date is a date." "Okay, a date will be a date." Though we joked about our new single lives, both of us knew that it was a day when our lives could change in many ways. The tension increased the whole time, and she took the day off after lunch. After work, I did some shopping before I went to my apartment and didn't expect her to come. But at 6:00 p.m., she rang my doorbell with a small overnight bag in her hand. Sarah said, "Just in case you were serious about our date." "I am." It had been a terrible day for her with a meeting with her lawyer. I suggested that she rest while I fixed dinner. After dinner, I comforted her while we were sitting on the sofa and talking about our crushed marriages. She asked me several times if I would take Angelica back, and I told her every time that it was out of the question. We went to bed early, but I didn't make any attempts at sex during that evening. To my surprise, she slept well and felt slightly better in the morning. The next weekend, we rented a minibus, and on Saturday we went to the nearest zoo together with her 2 children and my 2 children. To our great pleasure, everything went much better than we had expected. Now we knew that we could move together as a family. On Sunday evening, when Sarah had left her kids at her parents' home, and I left mine with Angelica, we had a romantic dinner at one of the best restaurants in town. Back at my apartment, we began an intensive kissing as soon as we had closed the door. Then we undressed each other as fast as we could before we fell to the bed. As she didn't make any attempts to stop it, we let it go the whole way. After some resting, we continued with tender lovemaking in different positions. Sarah told me she was happy because our first sex had been good, very good indeed. It was real love, tender but intense. Both of us were satisfied, especially me, because Sarah was much better than Angelica had been during our last months together. Angelica's lawyer had found out about my Gibraltar trip and tried to use it against me during the divorce proceedings. I got a lot of questions about that trip, but as I told the same simple truth every time, nobody could find anything against me. Though Angelica's lawyer had spent much time investigating my lost money, the divorce ended just as expected. Angelica got 50% of nothing and a huge debt to her lawyer. During a meeting with Angelica about our children, I told her that she ought to have listened to me when I warned her about lost sharks. She replied with tears in her eyes, "How could you take all our money? How could you do that to me?" I asked her, "How could you cheat on me? How could you do that to me?" Her reply surprised me, because I was an idiot, and that was the worst mistake I ever made in my whole life. Does Frederick know that you regret your affair with him? He regrets his part in this mess. Even he has paid a very high price for our affair, but you must be very happy now that you have got the woman you love. Please remember that I gave you a fair choice during our last breakfast as a family, and you preferred going to Frederick instead of having lunch with me. That was the worst mistake in my life. I lost the man I love, but though Frederick and I are the losers in this mess, we are making the best of the situation. Are you happy? I replied, "Yes, I'm very happy with Sarah, but it wasn't either her or my choice to be divorced. Both she and I had preferred to have our children grow up in a home with both parents. We are happy to have each other, and we will do our best to fix it." Angelica and Frederick bought my old house for a high price. In fact, they took over all loans, which gave them much higher monthly expenses than Angelica and I had during our time there. Sarah's husband bought her out from their house for a fair price, and she invested that money in a new house where she and I moved in. The police didn't ask me any further questions about the damages in Frederick's house in the capital area. Such matters are probably not big things there. During that time, the police were short-handed and had difficulties in their cooperation between different counties, and it didn't work well. I heard rumors that the house had been some kind of sole property for Frederick's wife, and she had even taken the main part of the insurance money. However, I was sentenced to 2 months in a white-collar jail and to pay Frederick compensation for the beating and for the damages in his small apartment in our town. I never paid him anything and do not have any intentions to pay him either. Of course, I have promised to pay him as soon as I get some money, but as long as I don't have any money, the authorities can't do anything to help him collect anything from me. Sarah and I quit our old jobs, which nowadays are done by Sarah's new consulting company, where I work part-time. I am driving a company car and living as a lodger in her house. It is a good solution for both of us. Angelica has not given up her search after my lost money. One evening she invited Sarah to a pub to talk about the children, and after several drinks, she began asking Sarah about the money. But Sarah could only tell her the truth, that she neither knew about any money nor cared about any darn money, because I myself was the best bargain she ever got in her whole life. Sarah and I have always worked well together, and now we have even created a very good family relationship with much fun together and very good love. My children like Sarah, and her children like me. Things went fine until even I heard the rumors about David bragging in town about winning Sarah back to him. I knew that he had been having weekly meetings with some kind of an expensive shrink and had bragged that he was cured of his previous problems. I didn't say anything about it to Sarah because I decided to let her make her own decision in this matter. Sarah's ex-in-laws could not accept that she had dumped their son and made several serious attempts to get her back to David. They used to call her at least once a week and had promised her a lot of benefits, such as a new car or an expensive holiday trip to South Africa for her and David if she took him back. One evening, Sarah had a worried look on her face when she told me that she was invited to David's younger sister's wedding. She told me, "I would like to go, but if you have any objections, I'll stay at home." "Why should I have any objections?" I asked. "Because I'm afraid that David's parents will be working hard at getting David and me together again, and a romantic event like a wedding will be a great opportunity for them to do their best to persuade me to do that. So I ought to stay away from that wedding, but his sister and I were really close, and therefore I would like to go if it is okay for you." The only thing I could do was to say, "You are a big girl, and if you want to go, you go. It would be fun to see her on her great day, because I suspect that there are problems in their relationship, and this wedding is their last straw to save it. So, are you really sure that you don't have any objections?" "No, I can't see any reason to have any objections. One good reason could be that I suspect there will be some drinking, and I'll have to stay overnight. Aren't you worried about that?" "No, why should I? As I told you before, you are a big girl who can take care of yourself. I love you so much. I love you." David's hometown was about 60 kilometers from ours, and Sarah left early on Saturday and was expected back sometime on Sunday. I hadn't asked her about any details because it was up to her to decide what she wanted to do. We decided to minimize the phone calls to only one, when she told me that she had arrived there without any problems, and I wished her to have fun at the wedding. She gave me a hug and kiss before she left. Of course, that Saturday was an important day for me, and I had feared it much more than I wanted to show Sarah. Everything could happen during her trip, and I knew that Sarah would be under heavy pressure from David, his parents, and friends. I had told Sarah that she was a big girl who could take care of herself, and nothing had gotten me to think anything else. I had my kids, so I spent most of the day working and went out for dinner and some beer with some acquaintances at a pub, but didn't stay long. I had bought a comedy on DVD, which I watched before I went to bed. To my great surprise, Sarah was back home already at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning and gave me a warm hug and told me to follow her to the bedroom for further hugging. Then she stripped herself, fell on her back on the bed, dragged me onto her, and whispered in my ear, "Oh, I love you so much. Make love to me." I followed her a few seconds later. Afterward, she asked me, "Did I shock you by coming home excited?" "You rather gave me a very pleasant surprise," I replied. "I love you so much for trusting me and letting me go to the wedding, though you ought to know that there would be serious efforts and temptations to get me to take David back." "I knew that, but I was sure you could handle it." "Yes, I did." Then she told me that as there were several relatives sleeping overnight in David's parents' house, they had planned to have David and her share a small room with only one bed. When they went to bed after the party, it was the bride who had given Sarah such inside information, though Sarah herself had expected something like that and had booked a room at a hotel. She had left the party when she felt that the booze suggestions about taking David back had become too common to be funny. She had skipped the Sunday dinner with David's family and left the hotel after her early breakfast. One thing was for sure, Sarah and I had a very good relationship. Last week, when Angelica and I met at a cafe to plan the next months for our kids, I got the impression that she looked more unhappy than usual. When I asked if Frederick and she had problems, she said, "Yes, we have, and I wouldn't hesitate a second to say yes if you asked me to come back to you." I wasn't surprised because the kids had told me some stories about Angelica and Frederick's disagreements. I asked her, "He cheated on his wife, and I'm sure you weren't his only cheat during that time. Is he cheating even on you nowadays?" She began to cry and sobbed. "Yes, I think so." Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.